Okay, this is Sydney Norris, and I'm doing my Theorist project on Jean Piaget. So let's begin. A little background information. He was born in Switzerland in August of 1896. He married Valentina and had 3 children. He published his first scientific paper when he was only 11. Off to a great start. Received his PhD in zoology in 1918. During the 1920s is when he began to do more work in the psychology area of things, and he is most famous for his theory of cognitive development, which is what we will be focusing on today. Some major facts. Piaget believed that children have an active role in the learning process. His interest in the cognitive development for children began and was inspired by him observing his nephew and his daughter. Up until Piaget's findings and saying that children were not as intelligent, not less intelligent than adults, but think differently than adults. Children were just treated as smaller adults, but once he said this, they started being treated differently, which is a good thing because obviously they think differently and should not have the same things as adults for some things. So let's begin with Piaget's actual philosophy. He focuses obviously on the cognitive development of children, and through his observations he developed the stage theory of intellectual development, which has 4 stages: the sensor motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. Over here is a little diagram with the different stages and age ranges and descriptions. The sensor motor is from birth to about 2 years old, and that's based on reflexes and senses and learning based off of that stuff. The pre-operational is from 2 years to 6 or 7 years old, and that is self-oriented or starting to learn things by themselves and do things by themselves. The concrete operational is the 6 or 7 years to 11 or 12 years old, and that is when they can see others' points of views and consider more than just one outcome. Then the formal operational is 11 to 12 years old to whenever, and that's when they begin thinking abstractly and can start reasoning with hypotheticals and theoretically. So let's go into more detail for the different stages. The sensor motor stage. Like I said earlier, it's from birth to 2 years old. This is when the infant knows the world from their movements and sensations, because that's all they know. They don't know how to talk. They don't really know how to. They start learning how to learn how to move and crawl and walk and stuff in here, but not much. They learn from basic actions like them sucking on a bottle or holding the bottle, looking at people, listening, and they begin to be able to tell the difference between people and objects, and they realize that the things they do causes other things to happen, like crying. They'll get a bottle and get the milk, they get what they want. A little more on this stage. Like the name of the stage says, they acquire their knowledge through sensory experiences and manipulating objects. They begin to learn with reflexes and senses And they go through a big period of growth, like, because they start learning how to crawl and walk, and they start babbling at this because they hear everybody else talking, so they start babbling at this stage. Some children actually might start talking, and then as children interact with the environment, they continue to make discoveries, but that's throughout every single stage, honestly. The pre-operational stage. This is from 2 years to 7 years old. And in this stage, they start going to school, and so you'll be able to start teaching them, and in their classroom, you can use some of this stuff. So the students in this stage demonstrate a high capacity for learning a language, so really learning how to talk. They don't have the ability to use logic when thinking. They have a difficulty remembering the orders of events and rules. They lack the understanding of cause and effect relationships. They have a difficulty understanding other speakers' messages. And they have big interest in social relationships and high level of activities, which is not surprising to any of us because children make friends so easily and they are always moving around. Just a little bit more on this stage. They begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. In this stage, they're more about themselves and struggle to see others' perspectives on things. They still think about things like concretely and not like abstractly, but again, they're getting better with their language and their thinking. Children struggle with understanding the idea of constancy. So like an example of this is having a thing of Play-Doh and dividing it in half, having one in like a ball and then flattening the other one out. The child is more likely to pick the one that's flattened out because it looks like it's bigger, like it has more, when there's not really. They're both the same amount. And at this stage is when they play pretend, and that's how they learn. And like I said earlier, they struggle with logic and taking in the point of view for others. The next stage, the concrete operational stage, from 7 to 11 years old. And so the students have an increased understanding of concepts when given concrete examples. So they have to have, like, this is for sure, and they understand that. Reasoning that reflects less reliance on observations and intuition. They have an increase in cooperation with peers and pro-social behavior. They respect for teacher authority. They have respect for teacher authority that gives way to argumentative stances. So and they have an understanding of honesty, guilt, and intention. At this stage, they begin thinking logically about concrete events. So if something is like for sure, like this is how it's going to be, they can think logically about it, like this is how it will end. They can think logically about the events up to that. They begin to understand the concept of conversation and like how to keep a conversation going or start one. Their thinking becomes more logical. They become more organized. With their thinking, they use inductive logic or reasoning. So from like broad to general. It's all about me or egocentric point of view from the pre-operational stage begins to disappear, and they understand how others will view a situation or how they might think or feel. So they begin to understand that their own thoughts are unique to themselves, and not everyone thinks the same way or feels the same way or even has the same opinions. Some people will have different opinions than you. Okay. And the last stage, the formal operational stage, this is from 11 years to older, and the students in this stage demonstrate an increased ability to think abstractly. So they're starting to think abstractly with not really like hypothetical. They have the ability to think about and actively control their thought process. They have conflicting feelings about connection and independence. They have a preoccupation with identity and status. They have an interest in theorizing, particularly about possible outcomes, and an idealistic belief system. They begin to think abstractly and reason about hypothetical problems, so they'll come up with hypothetical events, something that could happen, and think about that and how to solve that. They begin to think more about the moral, philosophical, ethical, social, and political issues. This is obviously they're becoming more mature and thinking more about their own morals and philosophies and ethics and how they want to be social. They begin to use deductive reasoning, so from going from specific to general, or general to specific stuff. And they can see multiple solutions to a problem and think more scientifically about the world. And they have the ability to systematically plan for the future. So this is when they start planning, in this stage is when they start planning for what they want to do for the future and how they're going to achieve that. Okay, so now some key elements for the different stages and strategies. For the first stage, the sensory-motor stage, Piaget believed that developing the object consistency, so that having the two different types of halves of Play-Dohs in different forms, it's actually the same. The understanding that objects continue to exist even when they cannot be seen, so like having milk in the refrigerator, but the refrigerator is closed so you can't see it, but it's still there, is important to the sensory-motor stage. In the pre-operational stage, students become more skilled at pretend play, but continue to think very concrete about the world. So they start to learn more about how others think and feel and views, but they don't really understand it, and they think about things as like, oh, this is here, or that's the answer, not there could be more than one answer. During the concrete operational stage, children's thinking becomes more logical, but they're still struggling with the abstract and hypothetical concepts, but they're starting to learn it. And then, so the concrete operational stage is kind of like a transition to abstract thinking. During formal operational is when they begin to think abstractly and to plan for the future and use reasoning in hypothetical situations and find answers to the hypothetical situations. So, methods to use this theory in the classroom. So one key element for teachers is to think about their students' age and how they're developing. So what's the age range for your classroom, and use that age range to figure out which stage and the way those students will be thinking. Teachers can apply Piaget's notion of simulation and accommodation when introducing new information. So use what they already know and build off of that. But don't build too much to where they aren't like completely like overrun. Then Piaget recommends that the teachers take more of a mentoring role towards students, so teachers need to be listening to students and figure out how they think and help them figure out different ways of thinking rather than just, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. Listen to the students and how they think about how to answer something or how something will end, and help them fix their thinking if it's wrong. And encourage the students to learn from the peers, so encouraging the students to talk amongst each other and help each other out, and then allow students to learn from their mistakes. So learning from their mistakes, they'll figure out what they did wrong and what they need to do differently next time. Focus on the process and the result. Don't just focus on the result. This is how you do it, so you get this all the time. So you'll get the correct answer all the time. If there's easier ways for the students to do it, they still get the same answer. And that'll be easier for them. But you have to realize that it's also the process that they need help with, as well as getting the end result. And respect each student's individual interests, abilities, and limits. You have to get to know each student and figure out what they're interested in and what they're able to do and their limits. And sometimes you can push the limits, but you can't push too much. And if you know the student's individual interests, then you'll be able to connect with them more and make them want to learn, because you can use their interest as examples in the classroom with whatever you're teaching. So that is my PowerPoint, and then I also created this handout with all the information that I had on the PowerPoint. This is here that I created to where I could hand it out. If they wanted it, they could take it and keep it to where they know they can look back and think about for the different stages, the information for them. They have the sensory motor stage here. I also have the pre-operational stage with how the students in the stage will demonstrate the things the students will demonstrate. Concrete, again with the demonstrations, and then the facts about it. Formal, like the other two, what they'll demonstrate and the facts. And then I also have the how to use in the classroom. So that way if they take this, they can remember things that they can do to use this in the classroom. That is all that I have for this. So that was Jean Piaget and his cognitive development theory. Thank you.